Hey, group leaders. So happy Theology Thursday. We're actually doing one of these on a Thursday. Hopefully it gets uploaded today and I can share this with you on your Thursday. Most of you guys are probably going back to work at this point, so I hope that you had a great Christmas break. Mine was awesome. My mom and dad came up, and so I got to do Christmas with family. And then I actually preached for a friend down in Georgia, so I got to see some more family and friends. It was a very quick trip. I just spent 2 days there and I came right back. But it was awesome. And I shared a message at Life Church Rome that I'm going to try to condense down because I think there's a couple principles that really just lend well into a New Year's kind of conversation. So I've been studying in Exodus and Numbers a lot lately, and I've been looking at the story of Israel coming out of Egyptian captivity and the story of Moses and Aaron and the plagues and all the things. And man, it's a really cool story. There's so much that God does in those passages there. I want to highlight a few things. So I know you're group leaders, but let me just recap you a little bit on some of the major highlights in case it's been a while since you've looked at this. Israel is under Egyptian rule, and they're in Egypt, so they're in captivity there. They're working hard labor jobs. It's a very brutal lifestyle. It is not the prosperous picture that God has for Israel in the Old Testament. And so they need deliverance from that. And ultimately, Moses, one of the most famous patriarchs in the Old Testament, people all around the world know about Moses. Judaism lays claim to Moses. Islam lays claim to Moses. He's one of these patriarchs that is kind of larger than life. So God uses him in an incredible way to lead the people out. And if you remember, he sends these plagues at the hand of Moses, and they range everywhere from disgusting, like the plague of the frogs, to horrific, which is where the death angel comes and takes the life of the firstborn from everyone who doesn't have the lamb's blood on the doorpost. And really ended up being a tragic ending to Egypt's occupation, because at that point Pharaoh's had enough and he says, fine, go. Changes his mind, of course, while they're on the run, sends the army after him. God parts the Red Sea. They escape through it, collapses the waters back on the Egyptians, kills all of them. It's total victory at this point. And so it's difficult because then even though all these really awesome miracles have happened, all this crazy stuff has happened, things that like you and I look at this point in history, I almost can get judgmental on them and think like, how is it possible for you to deny God or turn from God after you've seen all of that? But it's exactly what happens. And Moses is up there. It begins. He's on Mount Sinai, and he's talking with God in a way that really no one had ever done before. So much so that Moses' appearance is altered for a time, and his time with God, it was very unique. If you remember the story, he has to get hidden in the cleft of the rock. He sees God's passing backside. So this is really awesome moment is happening on Mount Sinai, and the people are down there, and they're kind of grumbling. And by the time Moses is done, it's like, well, you wasted a lot of our time, so we started to make a false idol. We started to worship it. Just crazy. You look at that, you think, what's wrong with you guys? What were you thinking here? So it doesn't go well. They're in the wilderness. You ought to, if you have time, Google Mount Sinai and go to the satellite image and the 3D rendering, and you'll see there's not a whole lot out there. It's a little mountain range, and it's wilderness. I mean, there's nothing for them, and they're feeling that. They're feeling the tension and the stress, and I get it. Scholars think it's anywhere between 1 and 4 million people that walked out. So I always saw it, like as a kid, I saw it as like maybe 20 or 30,000 or maybe 50,000 people. It's millions of people. I mean, we're talking about a large city, an Atlanta, a Houston, a Chicago, that gets led out into the wilderness, and they've got kids with them and grandkids, and they're scared, and they're freaking out a little bit, and it doesn't go well. So at one point, they actually start to plot to kill Moses. One of the things they say, let me share this with you. In Exodus 14:11, it says, they said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? And so here they are, they're led away from their captors, And they do what so many of us do as well. They're starting to long to go back to captivity because at least they got, their 3 square meals a day. Yeah, okay, they were under harsh rule, but at least, they probably weren't going to die of starvation. They probably weren't going to die from the elements. It was really bad, but I'd rather take really bad over this. And so, I mean, they really think imminent death is upon them. How often does God deliver you and me from sin and condemnation and imprisonment, maybe the metaphorical kind, but nonetheless, Bible talks about being chained by our sins, and then we run back to them. And we say, okay, well, that was at least comfortable. At least I understood that. This, where you've got me now, God, feels like the wilderness. And maybe, like me, you've even asked God, like, have you brought me here to die? One of the stories I told this last Sunday was when I became a church planner. To do that, I quit a job at a really large church where I was a student pastor, and I really had a lot of earthly cushy things that were really kind of beyond my years. So I was only 27 and had a great paying job and financial security and all those things. And I remember having a few of those moments in the early days of church planning, when I'm making a fraction of my salary and I'm wondering, how are we going to buy food? I can't even afford medical insurance. Oh my gosh, God, are we going to die out here? And of course, this is in the middle of the recession and no one can find work and church giving's down across the country. And I remember that. I remember thinking, did you leave me here to die? Maybe not literally, but I remember thinking, like, I'm going to be ruined. Like, God, why did you call me to do this? You are going to ruin me. This is horrible. And so I don't know if you've had experiences like that, but I think at some point we all end up questioning, like, God's plan for our life. And I think one of the conflicts that we have is maybe we question his plan, but often it's that we question his methods. We have this sense of, like, in America, everything should be going up and you should always make more money and your job should always be, have more esteem and you should have more authority and maybe less stress and you do less busy work the older you get and the higher you climb up your ladder. And it doesn't always work like that. I mean, we think about things like, oh, that would be so embarrassing to have to downsize my house. I'd hate to have to take a step back and, go down, lose a bedroom, lose 800 square feet. To go from someone who drives new cars to old cars, or maybe you go from driving old cars to barely running cars. And we think about these really superficial earthly things like, what will people think about our social status if we ever have to take a financial step back? And man, God just doesn't care about that stuff. He's really not concerned about how rich your friends think you are. He didn't send his son Jesus to die on the cross to fret about temporal things that moth and rust destroy. Yet we confuse sometimes the American dream with God's plan for our life. So I think a lot of times we struggle with God's methods, how he does things. Because the way he does things is often very countercultural to what we're used to. It's difficult, and it's hard to be that honest with yourself and to realize, like, man, I'm clinging to earthly treasures. I'm clinging to earthly things. One of the things I thought about with this new year is you see so many different posts on social media about, new year, new me, or you see people that are very excited about 2019 and they have great anticipation and maybe they're anxious about all the wonderful things that are going to happen in 2019, which is awesome. For a lot of people, 2018 was a very dark chapter. You could have lost a loved one, you could have lost a job, you could have encountered massive emotional and relational strife with family or maybe at your career or in your neighborhood, your social circles. A lot of people are so grateful for 2018 to be over. But I think about the culture that Israel had as we're beginning the story of Exodus. If you had bad culture in 2018, flipping the calendar page to January of 2019 doesn't change that. Like if you hated 2018 because your finances were in a wreck, perhaps you had big hospital bills that were unexpected, or there's always the unexpected. But typically, when you're in trouble financially, you have an accumulation of weeks and months and sometimes years and decades of poor financial decisions, spending more than you make, not saving enough, buying too much house, buying too much car, and so like. If we had financial issues because of our own actions in 2018, 2019 is not going to change that. If we have difficult relationships because we're short with people, or we don't listen enough, or we're just I'm gonna tell it like it is kind of person, and then we wonder why we don't have any friends. Like if 2018 caused us great emotional and relational stress, 2019 doesn't fix that. That culture follows us because 9 times out of 10, like, we're the problem. So there's this sense where Egypt is the captor and they're able to be seen as the bad guy, but a lot of Israel's issues ultimately were Israel's issues. Now, no doubt, God had to defeat Pharaoh and dip them in the water and cleanse them in the blood, and all those are important to the story. But we see in Numbers 32:13, it says, "And the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone." So the problem was, like, they got Israel out of Egypt, but they couldn't get all the Egypt out of Israel. And God had to kill off an entire generation before he allowed them to prosper and eventually move into the promised land. That's a dangerous proposition. So my question is that I want us to reflect on. I know this video is going to be a little long. Sorry. Hopefully it's an encouragement to you and it's worth your time. But my question to you is, what cultural things does God need to change in your life? That's something I try to reflect on a lot, because self-awareness, I think, is something that we all believe we have, but it's probably something that we're all weaker in than we realize. What is God trying to change in you? What culture, and to just talk culture real quick, culture is how we do things, or how we believe we should do things. So if I shopped in Asia, they're going to have different clothing styles. They're going to eat different food. Each church has a different culture. Each family has a different culture. I guarantee none of us celebrated Christmas the exact same way. So culture is just how you do things. So my question is, what are some of the things that you do that God wants to change your culture? Let me put it like this. So scholars think that the journey should have been about 3 days long, yet he had them wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And the Bible talks about them basically wandering around and around and around the same mountain. If you were in one of the senior adult services, I preached on this. I'm going to go a little deeper in this video session here. They wandered around the same mountain over and over and over again, literally to kill off a generation. Now, thank the Lord, I don't believe he's called any of us to do that. We've been delivered. The blood is here. We're in the new covenant. It's a new era. It's a new age. God is not usually asking that we die for him, with rare exceptions for missionary callings and such like that. But really, he's asking that we live for him. So I think it's very rare that God calls us to die for him in this new era. He wants us to live for him. But in this instant, they're wandering around the same mountain. Look it up. There's not a lot out there in the wilderness. So they went around the same mountain over and over and over and over again to change their culture. I think that there's times where we have a mountain in our life. And I don't know what yours is. Maybe you've been putting up with the same job that you hate or that you loathe, and you've tried to leave and you tried to quit, but God wouldn't let you, and he just had you wander around the same mountain over and over again. That you've been parenting and you've been going to all the parenting classes and you've read all the books and you've consulted all the friends and you've met with Pastor Bill, and you're putting up with the same issues and the same struggles with the same child for the last 10 years. Maybe for you it's health. Maybe for you it's finances. I don't want to discredit the literal mountain for the children of Israel, but I think the metaphor, the teaching principle applies to us, that you and I have mountains in our life, and there's times where we're thinking, God, move my mountain. God, move my mountain. God, you said if I have faith of a mustard seed, you'll move the mountain. And he may do that, but I think in many cases, God is using your mountain to change you. He is using your difficult situation, your tough circumstances, your pain, your regret, your job, your family, your ministry at the church here. He is using that mountain to change you. Leading a small group is difficult. I've done it for several years now. This always has new challenges. There always will be new challenges because people are hard. The joke people talk about all the time is ministry would be wonderful without the people. But I meet lots of pastors and ministers and aspiring pastors and ministers, and they complain about leading their small group and how difficult it is, but yet they want to lead a church or they want to lead a ministry. So they're a small group leader, but they want to be a youth pastor one day. Or they're a small group leader now, but they desire to be a senior pastor one day. And the word of encouragement to them is, you need this time in your small group. If you can't lead 12, leading a youth group of 50 or 100 or 150 is not easier. It's that much harder. Leading a church of 200 or 300 or 500 is that much harder. So don't wish away this experience. Don't wish away the hard times. God is building in your leadership through the leading of this small group so that you're ready to be a staff pastor. And he'll use that season so that you're ready to go lead as a senior pastor or an elder or whatever church system they're in. Let me make this a little more practical for you, because I know I'm chatting to an audience who's probably not in ministry. Maybe you want the big corner office. You want the big promotion. You want the vice president position, the CEO position. And if you're a middle manager, and let's say you're praying that God would let you skip that director level, that vice level, and you just go right to CEO, and you're going to be the one, that you're the talent that finally got recognized, and you get promoted to the top. How awkward would it be to get promoted to the top and to realize that the vice team that's sitting under you is way more qualified, way more gifted, and you know that you can't lead them, and they know that you can't lead them, and you know that they know that you can't lead them. Sometimes getting your blessing early is not a blessing, it is a curse. God is a God of processes. I put it like this on Sunday. I heard this, I'm borrowing this analogy from someone else. It's because I'm not this creative. But we pray for chairs, like beautiful handcrafted chairs, but God works in acorns. So even though you and I want the chair right now, we want to be able to sit in it and enjoy it and look at it, but God doesn't do that. He gives you an acorn. He says, okay, I want you to plant it. I want you to water it. I want you to fertilize it. As it starts to grow, I want you to reinforce it so that when the winds and the storms come, it doesn't break the branches or uproot the tree. And I want you to nurture it, and I want you to take care of it. And 20 years from now, you can chop it down, and you can cut the wood into planks, and you can plane them, and you can sand them, and you can measure, and you can cut, and you can fashion you a chair. That's how I work. Here's your acorn. And we don't like that. We want God to just give us the chair. God, he does that sometimes. But I think that's the exception. I think the rule is that God says, okay, I'll give you everything you need. After Elisha slaughters he's the leader of the slaughtering of the prophets of Baal and the showdown on Mount Carmel. If you remember the story, Jezebel vows to kill him. He runs into the wilderness and hides, and he's like, I want to die, and it's real dramatic, and it's kind of hard to understand. He's like, dude, you just won. It's just one little Jezebel. Don't sweat her. God wakes him up and is like, oh, I'm going to feed you. And he doesn't like put a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket next to him and like a Pepsi. He's like, okay, here's your gift. You get to go hunt and kill your food now. I won't go into gruesome details, but as a hunter, it sometimes is pretty difficult to find game. And even when you do, to drag it to where you need to go prepare it, and then to actually prepare it, it's a lot of work. You're talking about hours of work, even if you're lucky early on, before you're able to eat the game. There's so many times where God gives you your blessing, but it looks like a lot of work. Your mountain, don't wish it away. I believe God uses mountains to change you and to change me. I think he's changing culture in you and me right now. I think there's things that he's building in us that you're praying for, but you're not ready for yet. I think there's bitterness and there's anger that he's allowing us to circle around the mountain so that he can burn off. That the process of being in the wilderness is necessary for us. I know I'm getting long, so let me finish with this thought. This is a good story to go back and read if you haven't checked out in a while. Don't lose your faith. If you don't hear anything else I said, don't lose your faith. So oftentimes we think God isn't answering us, or we think God is mad with us, or that he's not there, or that he doesn't care. And I think that's wrong thinking. The reason we get to that conclusion is because we're saying, God, move our mountain. If you would embrace that God uses mountains to move us, I think it strengthens your faith. I think it brings you closer to him. John 15 says it like this. I'm the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Remember that God promised you that he would remove things from your life, even good things. So right now, the sin that we run to, the junk that we get involved with, it says explicitly he's going to cut that out of your life. We're okay with that. We kind of expect God to do that. What we struggle with is when there are good things in your life that God takes away. And I believe the passage is pretty explicit. The reason he does that, the reason he takes something good away from you is because he has something better in store for you. So I believe that 2019 really could be your best year ever. And in fact, biblically, it should be your best year ever. Because what God did in 2018 was he pruned and he worked on you to set you up for better 2019. Don't be so quick to be upset when God takes something good away. He may have something great in store for you. I know it's long. I hope this was encouraging to you. Love you guys. Appreciate all your hard work. Don't give up. God did not bring you into the wilderness to kill you. He didn't bring you out there to forget you. God is a God of streams in the desert and manna from heaven, and he will provide, and he will use this season to prosper you and to make his name famous in our world. God bless you. Can't wait to see you on Sunday. Talk to you guys later.